Bulletcast for life.
Welcome everybody to another edition of Under the Radar. My name is Brandon, and on today's episode we're going to go over a little bit of Raw and Smackdown from this past week since we didn't talk about it in depth on the Bulletcast. If you haven't checked it out, go listen to the 100th edition of the Bulletcast. We go over the 2018 Bulletcast Awards. Very interesting topics. Some awards I agreed with, some of them I did not, so go and check that out if you have not done so thus far. So we're going to go over Raw and Smackdown, and we will cover the last 2 weeks of NXT television, and let's just jump right into it. So we had Raw taking place once again in Sacramento, but they don't say that they took place in Sacramento because they don't want people to notice that it was the same crowd this last 2 weeks. So basically the show was pretty much what you would expect. It was nothing in terms of major storyline developments. I think the biggest thing I would say would be the Natalya versus Ronda Rousey match. I thought it was a very good match between the two. I thought they told a very good story in terms of Natalya and Ronda Rousey being friends and Ronda kind of being reluctant to go full on ahead and attack Natalya and kind of hurt her, but Natalya being, knowing that she has to pull out all the stops, she has to go super hard and she has to try to beat Ronda because, let's be honest, Ronda Rousey in the storyline is a better wrestler than Natalya. And then at the end, when Natalya finally almost had Ronda realized, okay, I gotta stop trying to be nice and get the victory. But then afterwards, when she did end up winning, they embraced, no turn, just simple, solid booking. I think this is a very good story. I mean, to be honest, this Ronda Rousey Natalya story that they've been telling throughout the entire year is probably one of the best storyline WWE have done this entire year. It's been long, drawn out, but not overstaying its welcome. And when I assume Natalya turns on Ronda, it's going to make sense. It's going to hit hard. And we have to wait till whenever that turn happens. Who knows where Ronda will be out by WrestleMania or afterwards, because it looks as though she's going to be facing either one or both Becky Lynch and Charlotte, so who knows if that's going to turn her heel, if this is just a giant debacle and maybe they have to turn Ronda Rousey heel. But I think right now the idea is for Ronda to stay babyface and have Natalya turn on Ronda, and I think if that is a match at SummerSlam with Natalya being a heel, sometimes Natalya's kind of been not the best heel. She's not a really good actress and she's a naturally likable person, I would say. So when she tries to act mean, sometimes it doesn't play off too well, but I think with the storyline the way it is, how they've had it, this is kind of one of the reasons why I'm a proponent of long-term storylines, and it's really just shown how great storylines can be when they're long and drawn out. Obviously, we had the storyline or feud of the year being Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa. That one was drawn out not because they wanted it to be, but just because of the injury. But I think having that long period of time of Gargano or Ciampa not being there, and then he shows up out of nowhere, kind of reignites the feud, and it's just what I like to see in wrestling. So the other big match on Raw was Corbin versus Seth. Seth does get the victory here, but I thought Corbin got a little too much offense in. If Seth Rollins is designated to beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, and he had a little slip up at TLC last week, and now he's going back and forth with Baron Corbin, who just got buried the last 2 weeks on WWE television. I mean, I don't understand the reasoning behind it. Yes, Seth did go over clean, but Baron Corbin, I believe, got way too much offense. And I think if you're trying to build Seth, especially after the slip up at TLC, you're trying to, regain that confidence with the crowd and regain his popularity. And I think just having him go over strong, sub 10-minute match, just put him over strong. Yes, Corbin can put some heat on Seth, but in the end, Seth goes over super strong, and have Corbin not really have any believable near falls, which I wouldn't say there's like believable near falls, but I think in their mind they had like those near falls where they tell you it's over, but it's really not. But Seth main eventing with Baron Corbin, I thought Ronda Rousey versus Natalya would have been the main event, but looking back, I think it was kind of that 11 or 10 o'clock hour was the like halftime for the Raider Bronco game, so I was able to get a hold of the remote and I put on the Ronda Rousey Natalya match in my house with my family. And, my aunt and uncle are usually the ones if I put on wrestling sometimes to like make fun of it and not say a whole bunch of positive stuff. But I wouldn't say they were like enthralled with what was going on, but they were paying attention. They were looking. My aunt's a huge Ronda Rousey fan, so just kind of putting on and show her what Ronda's doing now. Because I don't think she's ever really seen her. I did show her the WrestleMania match, but besides that, she doesn't really know a whole lot of what Ronda Rousey's doing in WWE. So, just a small sample size. The Ronda Rousey match was able to kind of hold a non-wrestling audience, and they weren't like laughing at it or making fun of it. Which some of the stuff, luckily, I did not watch like the entire Raw with them because there was some things on here with all the wrestlers wishing for what they wanted for Christmas, and I turned away right when the Vince McMahon announcement happened because he was dressed up in Santa Claus. I didn't know it was Vince at the time, but I just saw Santa Claus on my screen. I was like, okay, yeah, we're not going to watch this because I assumed the worst, and it wasn't actually that bad with Vince announcing that there will be a women's tag team match, or tag team championships rather. And I'm not a huge proponent of these tag team championships being a thing. I know on the internet, I don't exactly know how strong of an internet, how many people are actually wanting this to happen, but I just don't think you need more titles in WWE. If you do have more titles, then take away some. Merge the tag team, merge the women's divisions. Because if you look at it, how many viable tag teams are there really? There's the Iconics, who are kind of a joke. You have Sasha Banks and Bayley, who are I'd much rather see them as singles acts than a tag team act. You have, I don't know, you have the Riott Squad, you have Absolution with Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose, but, I mean, do those matches and those feuds really intrigue you as a viewing audience? I know they don't for me. I would much rather just see, you can have tag team or group feuds with women, but I don't think you need a championship to be on the line to settle those feuds. I think sometimes WWE just kind of relies too much on just having championships be the center of the feud. And yes, I know I've said like championships, like everyone should be vying for championships, but what WWE does is they just kind of have the championship be there and kind of it's just there, and then they kind of do some things, and it's like not, I mean, it's hard to explain, but it's like they have the championship being like the reason they're put together in the feud, because the writing team like, okay, now they're gonna face off because we haven't done that in a while. And the feud isn't about being a champion, being the best. It's like kind of petty, just angles that they do and all this other BS. But I don't know what they're going to do with the tag team championships. Do they debut them at WrestleMania? Do they debut them on Queen of the Ring, or whenever the next all-women's pay-per-view will take place? I don't know. We will have to find out. So, moving on to SmackDown, I thought SmackDown was a much better show. I think people liked the Raw. I'd be honest, I did not really like the Raw besides the Ronda Rousey and Natalya match. I thought SmackDown was a much better show. I did get the Rusev win spoiled for me when it happened. So, I knew going in Rusev was going to win the championship, and it was a good match. If you watched it on television, you would have thought the crowd was going bananas, but yet the audience with your eyes, the audience you could see, was not going crazy for it. But I thought it was a really good match. It went long. I think it went like 20-something minutes, but it was good. Rusev getting the championship win. He's a full-fledged babyface now. He's kind of a kooky, awkward. I mean, that's kind of like how his character was on Total Divas, as Nakamura kind of pointed out last week. I think him being the U.S. champion, I don't know where you go from here. I know the McMahons are saying that automatic rematch clauses are cliche and they're not going to do that anymore, but I think you go back to Nakamura one more time, maybe at the Royal Rumble or maybe another main event on SmackDown. And then looking down the line, I mean, Samoa Joe versus Rusev would be fun. Shelton Benjamin finally made an appearance on SmackDown this week, if you can build him up somehow. But I think if you're going to, are they going to have Mustafa Ali go against Daniel Bryan, or do you have Mustafa Ali versus Shelton Benjamin? I think Shelton Benjamin is so underutilized. I'm not saying I'm a huge proponent of him, but I'm just saying you have him on the roster, and SmackDown is just so I think both rosters are honestly depleted, and they could be much better than they are. But with Shelton Benjamin just being there on the sidelines, you can have him come up. I'm not saying push him to the moon, but you can have him have these mid-card feuds to where he puts over guys like Rusev and Mustafa Ali or whoever you want. And with Rusev going forward, I mean, I think it's a good choice to put the title on him. Better late than never, I guess. Rusev Day was so hot about a year ago this time, but it's kind of cooled off a little bit. Maybe with him being a babyface and being kind of more of himself, it can kind of catch fire again. Not exactly sure if it can be the same as it was last time, but with Nakamura losing the U.S. Championship, his contract, I believe, is coming up soon. Who knows if Nakamura is leaving? I think Nakamura has a good gig for him. He makes money. He's not having those strong style matches and hurting himself all the time. So who knows where Nakamura goes? Samoa Joe versus Jeff Hardy. It was just it was there. It was kind of weird. Like Jeff Hardy gets disqualified, but then Samoa Joe ends up getting the best of Hardy in the end when it was like all no holds barred and everything was going loose after the match was over. But I guess I thought maybe 2 weeks ago that maybe this feud they were just gonna it was done. Hardy got the best of him. That's that. But nope. It looks like they're continuing on with the story. Miz TV, Shane McMahon. I thought Miz delivered a really good promo. It seemed sincere. I thought it was a good babyface promo from him. Does this mean that Miz is going to be a full-fledged babyface and in the end Shane McMahon turns on the Miz? Who knows? Are we leading to a Miz-Shane feud going up to WrestleMania? I don't exactly know, but I think the Miz-Shane dynamic being a tag team, and I think Miz is he's a little bit too kooky and weird, or not weird, but too over the top, zany for me. But I think it's kind of catching on. He's entertaining. I'll give him that. But who exactly knows where this is going? What the original plan was with Shane winning the Best in the World trophy? I don't know if this is exactly where they thought they were going to end up, but it is. I think it can work. I think the crowd is behind Miz. They love Shane, and as long as they kind of play their cards right, I think they can get something out of this with the tag team. Do they go for the tag team championships? They go against the Bar? Maybe. I mean, the Bar is kind of so underutilized, I would say, and just not living up, but not used to their full potential. And I think they can be foils for Miz and Shane. I think Cesaro and Sheamus have good comedic timing, so if they want to do some sort of comedy tag team match or whatever, they can kind of play into that and do some angles backstage. So at the very end of SmackDown, after Rusev ends up winning the championship, they have this strange encounter with Vince and AJ. I just don't understand where they were going with this. Like, Vince was talking to AJ saying like, oh, you don't have that killer instinct and all this other like ruthless aggression bullshit that Vince said 15 years ago. But I don't think anybody was thinking that AJ is like, lacks that killer instinct, and he's had it ever since he was in New Japan. Like, we saw that happen. We saw him have that. This is the thing, is like, I don't think they showed this to the live crowd, so there was no real reports of this coming out of the TV taping. But I don't believe that's not a heel turn for AJ. You're not going to have AJ face off against Vince McMahon. Like, what's the end game of this? Is AJ going to be kind of like TNA at the end of his run, where he just like turns into emo AJ, but then emo AJ and TNA did end up turning out to be Bullet Club AJ, which was possibly my favorite AJ Styles. So we're going to have to see where that ends up. Daniel Bryan or Mustafa Ali beating Andrade Cien Almas. I think it's kind of a shame of what they did with Almas in WWE. He was such a good act. Him and Selena Vega down in NXT. They come up to WWE, and he had a little bit of a push there, and then he loses again, and now he's lost to Mustafa Ali. Mustafa Ali, I think he's a good act. I think he's a really good talent in ring wise. I just don't see where I'm not saying I don't see it in him. I just think WWE is going to get tired of him. He's Vince McMahon's new toy right now. He's going to play with them for a couple weeks, and then he's going to get bored with him. And we're going to talk about him in, come SummerSlam time, or maybe even whatever, April or May, and be like, what happened to Mustafa Ali? He beat Daniel Bryan and Andrade Almas, and now he's getting the Sheldon Benjamin treatment where he's not on TV at all. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go these next few weeks, especially with the New Year's Eve and New Year's Day editions of Raw. Usually those first Raws of the year are always kind of big shows for them. And then I believe that next week, the 6th or 7th, what day is that? The 7th. for Raw, but that is the the Sunday, or God, I cannot talk. The national championship for college football. So that's always kind of a big day for WWE. I think that's gonna what they're gonna shoot for. That seventh episode, that January 7th episode of Raw, to be, one of those big shows of the year, just going after it and really pedal to the metal for the build to the Royal Rumble. So I did my last Under the Radar show on Tuesday, so I have 2 NXT reports to get to you. So this one took place on December 19th, and we started off with the tag team match between Dakota Kai and Io Shirai going up against 2 of the 4 horsewomen, Marina Shafir and Jessamyn Duke. Dakota Kai and Io Shirai get the win in 4 minutes and 24 seconds. It was an okay match. It made sense for Dakota Kai and Io to go over. Obviously, they're the much more refined act. Shafir and Duke, super green. The 4 horsewomen, or the 2 horsewomen rather, they were fine. They didn't steal the show or blow me away by anything. They were just fine, decent wrestlers. They have the MMA background, so that always helps, but it definitely shows that they're green and they need a whole lot more of work. So I think right now they're just going to be fodder for people trying to get to Shayna Baszler, which is perfectly fine. I don't see either one of them being big stars right now. They could be down the line, who knows. Jessamyn Duke, she's a tall, skinny woman. She has a good look to her. Marina Shafir, kind of a more traditional look. She's a pretty girl. She's on the not shorter side, but she's a more average build than Jessamyn Duke, who definitely has a different look than the other 4 horsewomen. So I don't see either one of them being superstars. At the moment, they didn't show anything, but it was a decent match from them, under 5 minutes, and it made sense for Dakota Kai and Io Shirai to get the win here. So post-match, Shafir and Duke went to go creep up the ramp, and apparently blood was coming from Marina Shafir's mouth, so some blood in this match. They ran a promo package for Dominic Djokovic. I remembered watching the match that I was like, okay, this is how you say his name, and then now that it's a week and a half later, I'm gonna butcher it again. So they ran a replay package of Matt Riddle beating Punishment Martinez, and they cut not a promo, but Matt Riddle's in the parking lot, and they do the little mini press conference thing with all the different reporters asking him questions, and Matt Riddle kind of talked about Cassius Ohno. I forgot to mention this, but Cassius Ohno kind of attacked Matt Riddle after his match with Punishment Martinez. So Riddle just kind of calling out Ohno again, saying that he wants to face him again, and then he'll knock him out again in 7 seconds. So next up we have Dominic Djokovic. I think it's Dijakovic. Dominic Dijakovic going up against Aaron Mackey. And Dijakovic wins in 1 minute 46 seconds. Good squash, just getting over Dijakovic. God, I am going to butcher his name forever. I thought it was super simple, good intensity from him. I mean, it was just a squash match. He's kind of like the replacement for Lars Sullivan now that Sullivan's going up to the main roster. And he's not doing any moonsaults. He's not doing any, high flashy stuff that he did on the indie scene, which makes a whole lot of sense. He's kind of the big guy in the land of the smaller people in NXT. So Dijakovic, good, simple squash match. Hope to see more from him soon. They run a vignette on Heavy Machinery, and then we get a Heavy Machinery versus a Jobber match. So another squash win. Here, Heavy Machinery gets the win in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Good match, good squash for them, building them up to the NXT Tag Team Championship match that'll happen on the next week's edition of NXT. We're going to get into that very shortly. They run some stuff on Aleister Black and Gargano, and then this leads up to the Black versus Gargano steel cage match. And Johnny Gargano gets the win at 18 minutes. What happened was they go back and forth. Both of them are trying to get out of the cage. Johnny Gargano trying to go over the top. Aleister Black trying to go through the cage door. And then in the end, Tommaso Ciampa shuts the cage door on Black, beats up on him. Gargano looks down on him, maybe taking sympathy on Black, but nope. They end up doing their DIY finisher where one hits a knee, one hits a kick on the guy, and Gargano gets the pin on Aleister Black. Interesting story here. I talked about it a little bit on the Bulletcast. Are we going to see a DIY reunion? Where does this go from here? If it is a DIY reunion, a heel tag team with them, obviously not a tag team since Ciampa is the NXT champion, but a good little, pairing with them. Who knows where it's going to go from here? Do they use this to turn Gargano face? Do they use this to turn Ciampa face? Do they run heel rush shot over NXT for a while? Ciampa cuts a promo the next week on NXT where he talks about how he wants to have him be the NXT championship, and Gargano, after his win against Aleister Black, he deserves a championship shot, but obviously not against him, but maybe for the NXT North American Championship. So maybe we'll see that on NXT Phoenix or TakeOver Phoenix, where we might get Ricochet versus Johnny Gargano, which I would not be complaining. That match sounds amazing. And I thought the match itself was good. The in-ring aspect between Gargano and Black, their match at War Games was phenomenal. One of my favorite matches of the year. Not going to say it was as good as that. It was kind of it dragged a little bit. I think maybe having the cage there kind of hinders them a little bit. It confines them inside the ring and the ropes. So I think that might have hurt the match a little bit. But I think the main story coming out of this isn't really the match and what happened, not the outcome of it, but exactly what happened during the match of Gargano and Ciampa lining up. Something we wouldn't think would never happen after the matches that they've had, but now at the end of 2018 we see Ciampa and Gargano reunited, and it feels so good. So a good episode of NXT, and now we move on to this week's edition of NXT. We have the Fatal 4-Way number 1 contendership match for the NXT Women's Championship. So this show is basically built around the number 1 contenders match and the Heavy Machinery Undisputed Era Tag Team Championship match. So we have the Fatal 4-Way match, and Bianca Belair ends up getting the victory over Io Shirai, Lacey Evans, and Mia Yim. Bianca Belair ends up pinning Lacey Evans for the victory. It was a good Fatal 4-Way match. It only lasted 9 minutes and 15 seconds, so under 10 minutes, so they didn't have a whole lot of time to tell, a super in-depth story here. A lot of the women getting their spots in, some suicide dives. Io Shirai took this wicked dive where it looked like she landed either on her head, neck, or shoulder. They didn't get a clean camera view on it, but it looked nasty. Io took another bump where Bianca put her in a power bomb with Bianca's back up against the ropes, and then she just kind of tosses her over her shoulders onto the floor, and I think it was Mia Yim caught her, and then in the end they go back and forth with Lacey Evans and Bianca Belair hits her finisher and gets the victory over Evans. So Evans, one of the women getting called up to the main roster, ends up eating the pin here. Don't know if Triple H or whoever knew that Lacey Evans was going to be getting called up at this point during the TV taping, so maybe they would have had Bianca Belair beat Mia Yim. I think Mia Yim is probably the next person in line in terms of, likelihood of being jobbed out. I think they want to protect Io. Haven't really seen a whole lot from Io Shirai personally to make me believe that she's going to be, one of those top people at NXT like a Asuka or Kairi Sane, but she's still young in her NXT run, so who exactly knows what's going to happen there. Bianca Belair stays undefeated, and she will go on and face Shayna Baszler for the Women's Championship match at NXT TakeOver Phoenix. This should be a good match. It should be fun to see what they do with Bianca Belair. She's, as I've said in the past, it's kind of her character's interesting. Is she a heel? Is she a babyface? I think now that she's going up against Shayna Baszler, she's going to definitely more be on the cocky babyface side, but just a flip of the switch, she faces another person. If she ends up beating Shayna Baszler, she faces I don't know, if she faces Mia Yim or Io Shirai, she could easily turn into a cocky heel. So I think that's one thing about Bianca Belair that I like is at the moment is she's kind of straddling that line. She's kind of like the not stereotypical, but the proper definition of a tweener, just because I think people love her so much, but then she's just one or two things away from having people hate her. So I think Bianca Belair, nice to see her get the victory. She's athletic. She has a good look to her. And I think this is obviously her biggest match of her career, coming up against Shayna Baszler at TakeOver Phoenix. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with her. My early prediction, I think Baszler wins. I just don't know what they're doing right now with the Four Horsewomen, if they're going to bring them all up. Obviously, I just talked about Shafir and Duke are nowhere ready for the main roster, so are they just going to come up and just be job girls for Ronda and Shayna? I think as long as Ronda is a babyface, I don't think the other three horsewomen will come up to the main roster. But once Ronda turns heel, if that sometime in 2019 or in 2020 leading up to WrestleMania, who knows exactly when Ronda will turn heel. I think it's going to happen eventually, and I think we will get a Four Horsewomen faction. Maybe we get the Four Horsewomen versus Four Horsewomen match at Survivor Series. Who knows? That's a long time from now. But Bianca Belair versus Shayna Baszler. On paper, don't know who's going to win. It's kind of one of those things where that makes wrestling so much fun. You can't see either person lose, so that's why you have to tune in to watch this match. And with Bianca Belair being undefeated and Shayna Baszler losing in the past, but you want to keep her strong because Shayna Baszler, she might be like one loss. I mean, that she's going to lose the championship again after just beating Kairi Sane for it. That's going to hurt her on her believability and her gravitas, you would say. So, next up we have another match. We have Mitch Taverna going up against Jason Riker of the... or Jason Riker, whatever his name is, of the Forgotten Sons, and Riker gets the victory in like 2 minutes. Fine. He was super aggressive. It was kind of impressive, but I just think they've been not even really pushing the Forgotten Sons. They've just kind of been on TV. They haven't really done anything with them. They don't really impress me, so they're going to have to do a whole lot more to kind of get my attention. So then we had the Ciampa promo that I talked about, where he talks about maybe Gargano being the North American champion and DIY can take over and be dripping in gold. So the main event, we have Heavy Machinery going up against the Undisputed Era, which is Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong for the NXT Tag Team Championship. And no Bobby Fish or Adam Cole to be seen here. And Undisputed Era gets the victory in 11 minutes and 35 seconds. A very, very good match between these two teams. No outside interference from Cole and Fish, so the Undisputed Era just goes over pretty clean. And once again, one of the main roster call-ups, losing clean on their way out, so who knows exactly how long these call-ups have been in the works, but Heavy Machinery has been getting a push. They even talked before the match about how they've been undefeated for about the last 6 months, and they're hitting their stride, but just Roderick Strong and Kyle O'Reilly was too much, and they end up hitting the high-low on Djokovic, and he eats the pinfall here. So I thought it was a really good match. Heavy Machinery, I'm high on them. I think going up to the main roster, if they want to take the tag division seriously, Heavy Machinery can be a great babyface tag team. They're credible threats against the likes of Authors of Pain. They're funny, they're charismatic, but they're not just charismatic. They can get it done in the ring as well. Yes, they're not the Jason Jordan, Chad Gable, or the Revival. They're not going to have these super technical matches, but the crowd loves them so much, and they hit their power moves. Djokovic being the lovable big guy who does the caterpillar. I'm hopeful that if change is afoot, as the McMahons are saying, that everything's going to get shaken up and it's going to be a new era and blah 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 and all that other stuff. If they book them right, I think Heavy Machinery can have a very good life on the main roster, but we all know that's probably not going to happen, and the only person to still be getting some sort of a push in the main roster when we get to 2020 is probably EC3, to be completely honest. Maybe Lars Sullivan just because he's huge, but Heavy Machinery, I think, one of the standout acts in NXT in 2018, just because who really saw this coming? They were in NXT for a while. They were just kind of jobbers, just kind of big guys who could lose and make the other team look credible. But now I think they've really come into their own, and We didn't really talk about them on the Bulletcast Awards of, breakout stars, but I think in NXT it could be argued that Heavy Machinery might have been the most breakout star of NXT just because they kind of came out of nowhere. You have other people like Velveteen Dream Velveteen Dream, he was a breakout star, but we kind of saw it coming in late 2017. But I think Heavy Machinery is one of those acts that kind of came out. They obviously didn't get a big push like a Velveteen Dream or some of the other top guys on the roster, but Heavy Machinery, very good year for them, and hopefully they do well. So next week on NXT, I believe it is going to be a year in review show where just a lot of video packages and a lot of just match highlights of stuff that has happened in the past. So probably not going to go over NXT next week, but that is okay because we will be doing another Friday edition of Under the Radar. I will not be on the next week's episode of the Bulletcast. King of the Hill and the Podfather have some stuff lined up for you there for the next week, so 101st edition of the Bulletcast. But next week, I will come with you with my Wrestle Kingdom instant analysis. It is going to be amazing. I'm going to stay up at midnight, watch it all the way till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, and I'm going to get you guys that performance enhancing audio Friday afternoon, Friday night, Saturday morning, whenever you end up listening to this. I will get in my Wrestle Kingdom pre or post show analysis. Very excited. Kenny Omega, Tanahashi, Ibushi versus Will Ospreay. I mean, just match after match. Jericho Naito. There's so many good matches on this card. It's going to be a fantastic show. Cannot wait to see it. Once again, I've been kind of slipping on New Japan talk and watching it, but this kind of happens every year. I kind of fall off at the end of the year, but then once Wrestle Kingdom comes around, I get back into the groove. Then we go on, and then by the next thing you know, it's summertime, and then G1 comes around, and I watch practically every single big G1 match. So thank you guys very much for listening today. Hope y'all had a very Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year. If you don't celebrate Merry Christmas, hope you guys just have a lovely end of the year. Hope your 2018 was great. Hopefully your 2019 is even better. So until next time, till I see you next year with that Wrestle Kingdom instant analysis, goodbye and good night. Bye.